The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests including rugby player, father and role model TJ Perenara.
My family bring me joy. Rugby brings me joy too, but it's not the same joy as my family brings me.
And global dancer and choreographer Kirsten Dodgen.
For some reason, people think I'm very intimidating.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Kia ora, everybody. I'm not Jane. I know it's an unfamiliar and possibly distressing voice to hear in the Real Pod feed, and I'm about to give you something that's not the Real Pod, so apologies in advance for that, but I think you might be interested. I'm Duncan. I normally am 1/3 of the Real Pod, but I also have this side hustle called The Fold, where I talk about the media, and it might be tangentially relevant to Real Pod interest at times, but this week I spoke to Jon Wild, who is the series producer and director of the Apprentice Aotearoa and has also worked on shows like The Bachelor, The Bachelorette and New Zealand's Next Top Model. And it just felt like, at the back of it, I was like, I think the Real Pod would be into this. So if you didn't catch it on The Fold, we're popping it in here. If you've already listened to it, just skate on by. But if not, check it out and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Thank you. No mai hoki mai kia The Fold, e mihi nei, ko Duncan tōku ingoa. My guest this week is Jon Wild, who was the series producer and director of the Apprentice Aotearoa, which, man. So I do another podcast called The Real Pod, where we talk about reality TV every week. And the Apprentice was, I don't know, one of the most fun things to talk about and watch. It's a throwback in that while reality TV has evolved to become 2, 3, 4 nights a week, often an hour and a half long, it's basically just sort of eaten the schedule alive and lost, for me, some of its magic in the process. The Apprentice was a tight, once a week, hour-long show, and incredible cast. It had these beautiful kind of comic touches, but by the end it was all heart and a very sincere process. And the winner, Ness, who guested on the Real Pod, is just a phenomenon and just a very inspiring person, and I think she'll go on to great things. But I kind of think they all will. They were sort of moved by the process, and you never know what you're getting when you go into a series of reality television, whether it'll be just sort of a cheap, cynical time filler, or whether the magic will happen. And that's what makes it, the unscripted nature of it, and the fact that the volatility between the worst of it and the best of it is just such a huge gulf is what makes it so compelling. I know that for a lot of people, they have issues with reality TV, whether it's the aesthetic of it or even the fact of it, but I'm certainly not among them. So that's why it was such a privilege to sit down with Jon, who has worked on so many of, I think, the best reality shows. He worked on seasons 2 and 3 of New Zealand's Next Top Model, worked on The Bachelor and lately The Apprentice. And, it was a way of addressing some of those critiques, especially the producer manipulation, which he talks about, getting a sense of how important casting is, and just the way that the New Zealand character and our sort of more reserved nature feeds into our reality TV. I think it's a pretty fun chat. Might not be for everyone, but if you've ever watched and enjoyed reality TV and wondered how it was made, I think you'll get a lot out of it. Just before we get into it, I have to thank Vodafone. The Fold is proudly supported by Vodafone. The spin-off runs on Vodafone's network technology and relies on it ever more by the day. So if you run a business and need network technology, which you do, then check out vodafone.co.nz. This is Jon Wild on The Fold. Kia ora, John, and welcome to the fold.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I'm really curious. I mean, there's so much to talk about in terms of your career in the glorious industry that is reality TV. But I wanted to start by asking you what your path into the genre was.
Funnily enough, far away from reality TV industry. It was actually started off in sports broadcast in the UK, B-Sky B, the behemoth that is B-Sky B, working under some incredible people there and learning the craft of making media and bits and pieces and producing and directing. And then towards the end of my spell there, I was there for a fair few years, somebody passed on a show that was kind of like an insert into a rugby magazine show. It was only 2 or 3 minute inserts, but it was about using the power of sport and rugby in particular to help disenfranchised children, boys in particular, on this occasion, to take them and to give them a way forward in life. So we took a couple of former rugby internationals and normally took these children from Liverpool, North Wales, some pretty tough areas to grow up in, and use these internationals to give them a positive outlook in life and show them that there is a chance if you put yourself into something. So from there, that was basically my first taste of reality TV, and I was hooked. I loved it.
Because, in some ways there are more connections between, or as many connections between sports broadcasting and reality as reality and drama, in the sense of being unscripted and, on some level, at least when you're shooting, it's a live environment. In what way did sports help inform the way that you approached reality?
Well, it's that live environment. It's being able to cover emotions as they unfold, and just like in sports, reality TV is fairly the same. You never really know where it's going to go. You never know where the story's going to go, and sometimes, every now and again, things unfold that the best scriptwriters could never dream up. Just these events come through that you just think it's just incredible. Incredible stories, incredible emotion. And that's what I got, and that's what I loved about live sports and I think I saw it yesterday, big old Tom Walsh, this big Cantabrian, won a bronze medal, which a few people would have thought he'd be a bit disappointed with. And him breaking down on national TV yesterday, it's bringing tears to my eyes now. It's just incredible, watching this big guy get emotional, and he just looks so happy, and I felt so happy for him, and I love that about sport, and that's why I also love what I do in reality TV.
Were you a fan of the genre prior to, was it having been a consumer of it that drew you in, or was it the experience of making that rugby show? And have you? Yeah, so just talk through your relationship with it as a consumer as opposed to a creator.
I think there was this... I was a consumer, definitely. I kind of grew up around the time when reality TV came through, the first Big Brother in the UK. There was this one show in the UK that I watched for years and years that went on forever. It was Come Dine With Me. Oh,
incredible show. We only got one season of that New Zealand franchise, but that was a... And it's an interesting marker in some ways for the Apprentice Aotearoa and tonally, which we'll get to later. So, yeah, talk to me about your relationship with that masterpiece.
It just felt so real. It was just real people in a real environment, in their own rooms, just cooking for each other. And then you add in that little bit of competitiveness. Probably on that show, they added in a few drops of wine. And then you just watch it go and it unfolds. And it was it was the first time I really saw narration being used as a comedic tool to help it along. And I think that's what really sparked my imagination and where you can go with the genre.
Yeah, that it doesn't always have to be sort of high intensity, or you can leave in that with moments of comedy, which I think all three of the shows we'll talk about, New Zealand's Next Top Model, The Bachelor, and particularly Apprentice Aotearoa did very well. I mean, because growing up, or sort of that decade in the UK, 2000, 2010, when reality TV sort of ate the televisual world in a way, there was... It's funny, it reminds me of when there was this like musicians union in the UK which tried to get the synthesizer banned in the 70s. It felt like the sort of the elites of television drama and comedy found the idea of reality TV such an affront, and they tried to sort of create these intellectual and almost put up a wall that said this reality TV thing cannot infect our industry. Do you recall those debates, and what was your response to them?
I was probably a bit young when reality TV came in, and I probably didn't really care too much at that point about the intellects. Never really have done. So I wasn't really involved in that. I just enjoyed it.
Yeah.
For me, it's just on a pure basis, on a basic entertainment level. Are you left feeling satisfied at the end of the show? That for me is what it's always come down to. And I'll let for other people to debate whether it's got intellectual merits or whether it's destabilising society or whatever they think it's doing. But for me, it just comes down to entertainment, and it always comes down to people like watching people. And if you can capture that in an authentic way, then that's all we try and do.
Do you think, one thing which we've talked about on the Real Pod, which is the reality TV podcast I do alongside this, about the way that the New Zealand character is a bit more reserved. You've got a smaller population base to begin with, and so the talent pool can be quite hit and miss in terms of the quality and the way that the natural, say, American, Australian, even certain parts of English, even though they have the stiff upper lip kind of reputation, personalities, you don't have that kind of naturally aggressive, extroverted personality type isn't a cliche of New Zealand. Did you find that in the various roles you've had, whether it's, I don't know to what extent you've been involved in the casting process, that trying to get that reticent New Zealander out of its shell and giving you what you need to make the television was hard at times?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because I always kind of question myself why I moved to New Zealand to work in reality TV. You could have gone anywhere. My wife's Kiwi, and I'm glad we've ended up here. It's a fabulous country, and it hasn't been easy. But that's not to say you can't get the same results. Yes, Americans, yes, Australians are more outward in their emotions from a pretty early stage. But I think you do get the same thing from Kiwis. I think they just you have to earn their respect a bit more. I think it's all in there. Everyone's got it in them. They just have to trust you a little bit more, and then they have to realise that you're not out there to get anything negative out there from them. You're just out there to show them as they are, and hopefully that's what we do.
But are you though?
Yeah,
because the reputation or the certainly the standing myth of reality TV is that producers or the production, to use a catch-all, manipulates people into doing or saying things that they'll later regret. And there was that show Unreal a few years ago, which provided a very sort of amplified version of that and might have contributed to the myth in some respects. But when you look back over a good decade in New Zealand reality TV, do you feel like, to what extent has that been true? Like, do people come out of it feeling like they were well represented, or do they feel in some sense betrayed at times?
I think you can approach it in lots of different ways. I can only talk about my approach, and what I try to do when I'm making these shows is make it an authentic, possible as authentic a process as possible. For me, I want the contestants, the cast, to believe in what we're doing, and for them to trust us that we're not going to make them into personalities that they're not, which is also an extremely difficult thing to do. You can't, in the edit suite, to be able to change someone's personality is very hard. Now, what does happen occasionally is you do get people coming along who maybe don't understand their effect on other people. And then when that gets shown on TV, they quite rightly think, well, that's not who I am. From my perspective, the way that I like to shoot, we don't change people at all. We don't change their personalities. What they say, and we always tell them that up front. That whenever they come and join with us, anything they say, it's kind of like the Miranda rights cannot be used against it. So they're very aware of that from the start. But in terms of manipulating people and changing their characteristics and personalities, it's not something that we go into doing. It's not something that's easily achieved. It's not something I think on a New Zealand budget you can do.
I mean, that New Zealand budget thing's interesting because does that in part how much you shoot, how covered they are? Because you look at something like Married at First Sight Australia, which it feels like they're everywhere all the time. And, that's an interesting show. Like, are there any shows which you look at and you go, this is incredibly entertaining, I couldn't work on that? Like, is there a line for you internally? Because I look at that show and I find it so compelling, but I'm not sure that it should be allowed to exist in the world. Yeah. And there are others like it too.
Totally, Married at First Sight. I love watching it, but I can't tear myself away from it. But morally, could I work on that show? I don't think so. I find it fascinating. I love talking reality TV. I find that show fascinating because, we're talking about New Zealand budget, and we do struggle for coverage. If you watch the American shows, you watch the UK shows, they've got cameras filming 24/7. And the contestants aren't allowed out from the microscope. It's harder here because there are breaks. They know at the end of the day, we're going to stop filming, and then they can get their release there. On the bigger budgets, there is no release. Whereas Married at First Sight, it's the first time I've ever seen it, they constructed pretty much a whole series on the last series that happened off camera. The whole sort of party.
In Married at New Zealand?
In the Australian version I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was just phenomenal how they obviously weren't filming the party and whatever happened there on the previous series. But then that became this editorial line for the whole show, and we don't know what it was about. They didn't cover it, but they very cleverly managed to weave it in.
Yeah.
And that is what a good reality TV producer does. They didn't try and recreate it. They knew it was gone. They knew it was lost. They knew they didn't cover it. And they're like, well, what do we do now? And they just said, well, we just roll with it. That's the only thing you can do, and that's fantastic production.
Have you enjoyed the way, or do you have a perspective on the way that production is increasingly visible within the shows? That the pretense of we're just shooting here, suddenly, like times you see producers on camera, that there's audio of them speaking. You'll see them walking out of the sets into these weird back areas. Like, have you enjoyed that development, or it's very new. I like it.
It's great, and I guess it's part of the reason why I'm here talking about it. It's great to open up on it. For a long time, Hollywood's been very open about what they do, and making films, filming behind the scenes, showing the what they can create. On with sets and it's all make believe, and you watch it with green screens and what they do to create the wonderful films that they make. And it's the same with reality TV. It's not a documentary, so we have to use what we've got to make the show entertaining. And part of it is the fact that the crew do have to get involved from time to time. So when that happens, it becomes part of the show. It impacts on the contestants. So absolutely, I think it has to be filmed.
And in a lot of ways, it is a bit of a counter to the idea that there's this manipulation, or at the very least, the more you show of it, the more the harder it is to kind of level that critique, because you're starting to see the construction on television as well as the the intended action. We're just going to take a very quick break and come back with more from Jon Wild on The Fold.
Kia ora, Justin Giovanetti here, and I'm the political editor at The Spinoff. This podcast, like so much of the work we do at The Spinoff, is made possible by the support of our members. To find out more about The Spinoff members and how you can help us keep producing quality, independent journalism, visit members.thespinoff.co.nz and do it today.
I want to talk about, I think it was your first big New Zealand reality show, and one of my favourite, one of the ones that really hooked me into the genre was New Zealand's Next Top Model. A not uncomplicated show. You're dealing with very young women, and some of them essentially still children. But that was electric television when you kind of at the time, and I think kind of was one of the first big international franchises that really felt like it had a truly kind of New Zealand flavour to it. Tell me about working on that.
I think I'd just come over from the UK, and I think it was my first job here. And I'd worked with John McDonald before on the 2007 World Cup in Paris at MediaWorks. And they said they were doing Top Model, and I was like, well, I'll come and direct. I've done a show in the UK, and they're like, oh, wow, it must be. Like the show I did was very basic, grassroots. I came in and I met John Anna Lynch, the producer, and blagged to them that I could direct this thing. They believed it, and away we go. I remember the next thing I'm in Wellington. I remember standing there, and it was like my first day, and there were hundreds of people walking around, and there was like a cast of 20 girls, and there were 50, and there was a big walk-in, there were cranes, and I was like just waiting, and I was just standing there, and like people were looking at me, and I was looking at them, and they were like, are you going to do anything? I was like, oh, action. There we go, let's go. And then jumped into it from there and loved the process, and working with a great production crew. So working under Anna Lynch, who's an incredible producer, learned a lot from her, and also with a great talent working with Colin Mathura-Jeffrey, which was a very interesting, exciting experience every day.
Yeah, he's an exceptional human. That also, we recently rewatched the first season for the podcast based on the 10th anniversary, and they're really struck by that was a big budget show. They're just flying around New Zealand. It doesn't feel like there's any expense spared. There is more reality TV being made, it feels like now, but are the budgets shrinking, or like what's your kind of sense of how creative you need to be to give you, especially certainly the amount of TV you're having to create, as these things stretch over multiple nights, is, those things were so tight as a drum back in the day, and that's actually what was lovely about the Apprentice Aotearoa, that it was an old school throwback, just an hour a week. Thanks. Yeah,
it is. I agree. I think sometimes if you're force-fed everything too quickly and you just binge watch it, you don't get a chance to think about things too much. So I love the fact that it's an hour a week, and you build that into anticipation each week. And at the end of the episode, you're like, oh, damn, I've got to wait a week for it. No. In terms of budgets, I mean, I can't say too much about the budgets. I mean, I didn't work on Top Model Series 1, so I can't say I had any.
But even the thing you're describing, the cranes and all that kind of thing, I don't know if that's... there's probably still some of that. But,
there is still some of that. I mean, but you use your money where you can. And the great thing about reality TV is, although it's great to make things look wonderful and scenic, the important thing is the people. The important thing is the content.
Some of the greatest scenes in reality TV history have been like a static shot of a toilet door with people on microphones saying some very indiscreet stuff behind it, So,
absolutely. Yeah. It's I mean, I've some of the best camera work I've ever seen from some talented people down the years has been them obscuring themselves away so that they don't impact on the content, and just hiding away, rather than you'd thought most cameras would get out there and put cameras in the faces, but sometimes you just have to retreat, and that's down to the operator and how they feel it, and And, you end up with a really wonky framing or, of kind of like just somebody's half a face or something in there, but you're getting real content. And that's always the gold. That's always what you strive for.
So when it comes to, on those 3 shows, Bachelor, so you were season 1 of The Bachelor, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Were you sort of, that's again become quite an iconic season, and certainly it's very rare for any international franchise to persist as long as The Bachelor and now Bachelorette has in New Zealand. Were you sort of aware that one was a bit different from your average in terms of the quality of the casting and the storylines you were getting? You
kind of know when you're filming whether you're getting what you want. And on The Bachelor, it took a wee while to get into it. Art was a bit reticent at first to get stuck in. But you just knew when we were in the middle of it, and even from an early days, it was fun. The cast were having fun. The crew were having fun. It was hard. It's always hard and pretty stressful, but that's kind of like why we do what we do. But it was a very enjoyable show to work on. I think everyone believed in what they were doing, and it was. And I think, and it all comes down to the fact that the contestants really believed in it and genuinely liked Arthur.
He's quite a likeable guy.
Annoyingly so.
What was it, when you're working on a show that is not just competitive but also has the added element of, like, you're trying to find love here, like you're playing with people's deepest emotions. Was that a bit of a, and there were a lot on that, like Danny, I think in particular, was left pretty hurt, like she was invested. How did you kind of have to evolve the craft to kind of, or what did you sort of learn through that process?
Yeah, at the start it was a very positive thing. For me, it's the ultimate prize. Finding the love of your life.
Yeah.
And that's how I sold it to myself and to other people. It was the first time I'd done a show like that involved people's emotions. And I began, towards the end when everyone was really starting to get invested in each other, I saw the potential then that, people are going to be heartbroken at the end of this. And that was hard. I think what maybe people don't understand is that we really do bond with the contestants. We feel the emotions that they feel. And to see people heartbroken at the end is not what we're after. It's an inevitable byproduct, but it's not what you're there for. It's not what we're there for. I mean, I'm always there for the end result, for the winner, that moment of glorification and happiness. But along the way, someone's got to lose. And when you have a format like that, which is based around people's emotions and heartfelt feelings, then it's a big drop for them.
That show is notorious, or the Mike Fleiss shows are for their Bible, the extent to which the whole thing is quite tightly, not scripted, but kind of controlled. How is it working with those? Do you learn a lot from that? Are they constricting? What's the vibe?
Interesting. Yeah, we got on the Apprentice Aotearoa, we got sent a Bible by MGM, and it was for season 1 of the US Apprentice.
Really? So I just haven't touched it.
And it was like, okay, let's and we took a lot out of it. Don't get me wrong.
Are you bound by it, or is it just something to help you make it?
No, it's something to help us.
Right.
We're not bound by it, but at the same time, there are key format points.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't want to and cannot
otherwise,
change.
I mean, that's kind of what you're paying for, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the difficult one on The Apprentice is obviously the "you're fired" comment, which seems very dated nowadays.
Yeah. It also doesn't really happen in a New Zealand context in the same way. We don't have fire at will legally, it doesn't really work like that here.
No, and it was difficult, and it was I think it was difficult for Mike to say every time. Not easy for anyone. The finger points. We're going to get into that.
We probably should. Rate him on his finger pointing, and do you believe that our ranking accurately captured his progression as a finger pointer over the course of the series?
Oh, he improved. By the end of it, that was a scary finger. He never wanted it to come anywhere near you. That's for sure.
So let's talk about the Apprentice Aotearoa. Did you have any kind of apprehension coming into it based on the fact that the big star of the US Apprentice had been, probably the worst president and one of the most toxic forces in humanity, and at the time it was announced he was still in office, that the brand had been tainted by that?
You know what? I didn't. I was lucky enough coming from the UK to have watched The Apprentice UK from its inception and seen it grow. And I've always thought that was just an absolutely wonderful masterpiece. And I just tried to replicate that version. So, I mean, it's quite interesting. Every country has a little twist on things.
Kind of reveals their sort of business culture in some respects.
It does, and it was a lot more grassroots, a lot more down to earth. It showed the contestants going to business estates and working out of just factories and showing the dirty side of business, and the hard graft side of business, which is where Lord Sugar came from. So they embraced all of that side of things, and I knew that if we embraced that side, that's a much more Kiwi version of business, just kind of like that grassroots startup connection, which is what Kiwis are fantastic at, wonderfully creative, and also dogged in their pursuit to get their startups going.
You were blessed with this cast. It's just such a special group, both the contestants and the judges. Were you involved in that process, and how confident were you going? Did you have an inkling again going in that this was going to be one of the all-time greats?
Yeah, the casting process is always really interesting. Sometimes you get thousands of applications, and sometimes you get 42.
Yeah. Was this more of a 42? I was just talking to a friend who, checked in on LinkedIn for the first time in 3 months and found a message from her saying, would you like to be on The Apprentice?
We had a wonderful casting producer who worked incredibly hard to spread the net far and wide. And we put out a call to action through TVNZ, and the network helped host that, facilitate that. At the end of the day, we didn't get many applications in. The ones we got in were absolute gold.
Yeah,
and
that's in some ways that's better, right, than dealing with thousands of people queuing out the door and all of them duds.
It saved a lot of time and effort, and you get the videos in, you never really. And then I come in and I kind of met them all, and then and we knew from an early stage that we had the right cast, because it's so different to making any other kind of TV, especially sort of drama, where you put all your efforts into your script, and then and you hire incredible script writers and develop the stories, and what you've got to start off with, and what we do, it's your script is in the cast, as someone once told me. It's all about the casting, and if you don't have the right cast, then you won't end up with the product that you're after.
Yeah, I know. It was a very special season. That's all we have time for. But thank you so much for coming on here, Jon. Absolutely loved your work, and particularly the Apprentice is just. I'll remember that a long time. So, yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Can I quickly say it wasn't just me. There's a whole big factory behind me making it work out. So, but thanks for bringing me in. Cheers.
That was Jon Wild on The Fold. I just want to thank Te Ahe Butler for recording me today, Jane Yee for running the Spin-Off Podcast Network, the Spin-Off members for making the Spin-Off happen every single day, and Vodafone for bringing you The Fold. Cheers.
Talofa lava. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Ahe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.